The House That Arguments Built. At the corner of Maple and Judgment, a name I swear fits too well to be just a coincidence, like a quiet joke carved into a common street sign, stood the Weldon House. It was a perfect-looking, square-shaped house, a silent monument to neatness and what I'd call trying too hard to be successful. From the street, it looked like something from a fancy home magazine, all clean lines and soft colors, and honestly, a little too pleased with itself. Its big, clean windows reflected the sky blankly, giving no hint of the small, hidden storm that lived inside our family. You wouldn't know just driving by that behind the perfect lawn and the neatly cut bushes, there was a constant, low buzz of unspoken feelings and arguments. I knew the Weldons, or more accurately, everyone in our neighborhood knew about them. They recycled everything, hosted nice, carefully planned parties, and waved from their driveway with just the right amount of friendly and proper. Their whole existence felt like a masterclass in putting on a show. But once, at a block party, I overheard someone say they were performatively functional. I didn't get it then, being too caught up in my own teenage world. But now, having lived it, I do. It meant that every hug, every shared laugh, every problem solved felt practiced, edited, polished for an audience no one could see. I was 16. In that house, at that age, being 16 felt like it was meant to be. It was the age when the old ways of just obeying my parents started to bump hard against my new need to be my own person. In our house, this caused a special kind of heat. It was the age when my thoughts, already always there, began to get sharper, picking apart reasons and putting behaviors into categories, like a bored scientist studying a new tribe. I wasn't the kind of noisy, rebellious teenager you read about in books, slamming doors and glaring. Ethan was the kind who read Slaughterhouse-Five by himself in September, months before it was assigned at school, finishing its dark humor and mixed-up timeline in one weekend. Then, he'd stubbornly refuse to talk about it in class because everyone was missing the point. You might think he was difficult. He wasn't, not on purpose anyway. He was exact. His annoyance was controlled, showing up not as yelling, but as tight sighs and slow movements. He was polite until pushed, his voice staying calm even when he was very frustrated. He listened closely, almost too closely, and he remembered things people said, even if they wished he wouldn't, storing away casual comments like important facts in a complicated computer program. In a family that worshipped emotional intelligence like it was a second religion, showing off its rules like excited new believers, Ethan often stood out. Not because he lacked feelings, but because he understood them perfectly, while the others mostly just pretended. He could see the hidden meaning in a sigh, or the secret goal behind a tricky question. This skill was both a gift and a burden. His mother, Elaine, was a therapist, of course. Her work life was all about truly listening, quiet understanding, and the kind of deep silence that made grown men cry their biggest fears into her office tissues. She was good at her job, really, but when it came to Ethan, her skills changed into something like a show. Her famous, all-encompassing empathy strangely dimmed around her own children, like car headlights and thick fog, unable to see through what was familiar. With us, her questions weren't about finding out, they were about investigating. Her silences weren't for listening, they were for judging. His father, Greg, was harder to understand. He worked in systems architecture, a job that sounded intentionally vague, as if saying more might break the complex, carefully built magic of his career. He moved slowly, on purpose, and stood like a man who was always buffering, as Ethan once joked. Greg liked clear plans, not making things up as he went. His parenting, much like his detailed work charts, was structured, logical, and totally unable to handle real emotions. It worked well for clear systems, but less so for the messy, unpredictable parts of being a teenager. And then there were my siblings. Abby, 13, was skillfully walking the tricky line between being a girl and understanding big social ideas, like a calm leader in a peace talk. She was great at sarcasm, using it very precisely.
She was also good at quick apologies and spoke what I can only call pure teenager speak, a language of eye rolls, vague grunts, and sometimes very serious statements about how unfair the world was. Max, the youngest, was 10, a small, bouncy ball of endless curiosity, and completely sure he was a genius. Every afternoon he tested this idea in the garage with different things that could catch fire. The results usually included the smell of burnt hair or the loud shriek of a smoke alarm from far away. To people outside, the Weldons seemed almost perfect, something to look up to. We were the family with the good kids, the parents who always seemed together, a perfect mix of smarts and feelings. But for those of us who stayed long enough to notice the small cracks, the tiny differences, something just didn't feel right. There was love in the house, yes, true and deep, but it had been turned into a process. It became gestures, symbols. Love was measured by homework help, careful vegetable dishes, and planned silences after tough talks. It was love, but it was also a system.
And in the middle of it all was Ethan, the unwilling main character in a family drama no one else seemed to know was happening. The unwilling center of gravity, trying desperately to stay in his own space while constantly being pulled by the combined force of their kind-hearted, often confusing care. Part 2. Arguments as ecosystems. If you want an example of how the Weldon family operated, a perfect small picture of our strange ways, just look at what I now call the Sunday roast incident. It was a perfectly normal late afternoon. The smell of roasting beef and rosemary filled the kitchen, promising warmth and comfort. It started simply. No slamming doors, no yelling, no insults, just one of Elaine's loaded questions, thrown out like a hand grenade wrapped in a fancy napkin, its pin silently pulled. "Did you wash your hands, Ethan?" Her voice was calm, but carried years of unspoken meaning. It wasn't just asking, it was a way to make me think about myself, a gentle accusation hidden as concern. Ethan, reaching for the roasted potatoes, answered with his usual sharp, factual way. Just now. It wasn't, let's say, convincing. It was just a fact, without any extra feelings. Max, always looking for a chance, jumped in like a smart lawyer. "He touched the dog 5 minutes ago. Just saying." Ethan paused mid-fork. "She brushed against me. That's called living in a house with a mammal, Max." He wasn't just defending himself, he was explaining a basic rule of living together. Elaine's eyebrow went up, a small movement with many hidden meanings. It was the same eyebrow raise she used with difficult clients. Here, in the kitchen, it turned into a specific parent's disapproval. "Ethan, dear, it's about being clean and being open. We just want you to be honest about what you do." "I am being honest," Ethan said, his voice calmer than angry. "It's like every time I just exist, every time I do something normal, someone turns it into a lesson, or a moment for being open." He felt the air get heavy, the unspoken idea that he was purposely being difficult hanging in the air. Greg, always trying to fix problems like a computer program, offered something about rules and eating roast beef. This didn't make things clearer or calmer. "Maybe," he started, "we can make a clear rule for washing hands after touching pets. And let's not forget how good this roast is for you." Abby's eye roll, a silent, clear sign of what she thought, was so fast it could have been an exercise. It was a small fight, really. Not a big deal for most families. But in our house, even small things added up. They weren't just separate fights, they were entries in a never-ending emotional record. Every interaction was carefully noted, every hidden meaning analyzed. And Ethan, with his inconveniently precise understanding of logic and how people act, knew the numbers better than anyone. He wasn't just reacting to the surface criticism, he was reacting to the deeper, unspoken idea that he needed to be fixed, that his intentions were always doubted, that his normal way of being was somehow wrong and needed constant, loving adjustment. That in a family full of good people, he was the odd one out, the exception to the rule. Part 3. Philosophers at Recess.
School didn't save him completely, but at least it made the constant family judgment less intense. Ridgeway High, with its bright lights and constantly peeling paint, offered a different kind of pull. Here, arguments were about big ideas, not about washing hands. People were judged by grades and social groups, not by how pure their intentions were. At Ridgeway, Ethan lived in the middle, too smart for the jocks, but too real for the growing group of cynical kids. His friends were mostly the type who had half-read novels by unknown Russian authors in their bags, and who debated big social theories over snacks from the vending machine. They were the ones who liked his exactness, his quiet focus, his ability to break down an argument to its core.
In debate club, he found something close to peace. It was the only place where his exactness was praised instead of punished. When he argued about unfair court sentences or the complicated rules of artificial intelligence, his points were clear, his logic unbeatable, and people would snap their fingers in admiration. Here, his quiet focus was a strength, not a flaw. At home, that same tone, that same exactness, often earned him dish duty or a speech about how important active listening was. It was a sharp difference, a constant reminder of the different ways he was judged. One unusually warm autumn afternoon, he stayed late to talk to Mrs. Henley, his English teacher. She was a woman of quiet wisdom, always wearing a shawl even on warm days, and completely, wonderfully against common sayings. Her classroom was a safe place of old books and quiet thoughts. "I don't get it, Mrs. Henley," Ethan confessed. "I try to be fair, I ask questions, I listen, I don't yell, I try to understand their side. But the calmer I am, the more everyone else seems to get upset. It's like my being reasonable makes them more intense." He felt like a human dampener, accidentally causing the very emotional explosion he was trying to stop. She looked over her half-moon glasses. "Sometimes, Ethan," she began, "being calm is a kind of power. It suggests you've already won. It suggests you've thought it through, understood, and moved past the emotional mess. And for others who are still stuck in it, that can seem distant or even rude." He blinked, surprised. It was both too vague and too painfully clear. His attempts to calm things down were, to them, a sign that he thought he was intellectually superior. "You can't change your family like you change an essay," she added, a faint smile on her lips. "But you can put periods on your survival." She tapped a well-worn book on her desk. "You can choose where the sentences end and where a new chapter begins." The idea of punctuating his survival stayed with him, a quiet hum in his mind. It suggested he had power, control. It wasn't about running away, but about writing his own story within the bigger, messy story of the Weldons. Part 4. The Complication Equation. February, usually a month of gray skies and boring routines, broke things. It wasn't a sudden explosion, but a slow, quiet wearing away, like rust eating through a carefully built structure. The neatly constructed appearance of the Weldon family's good working order started to crack under the growing pressure. Elaine, my mother, expanded her therapy practice. This meant longer hours and less emotional availability at home. Her finely tuned empathy was now almost completely focused on her clients, leaving the family's small upsets unmeasured, unanalyzed. The subtle changes in her voice, once so good at showing her feelings, became hurried, distant. Greg, my father, started commuting again, a tiring 2-hour drive each way. He was physically home less and mentally elsewhere more, lost in the complicated plans of his work. His careful planning was now entirely focused on his job, and his parenting, already bad at dealing with emotions, became even more automatic. He'd nod vaguely when spoken to, his eyes fixed on some distant, invisible work chart. Abby, my 13-year-old sister, got into some trouble involving a vape pen and a quickly written statement about suburban pressure. Her new political ideas, usually kept to her online groups, now spilled into the real world,
causing many tense family talks that ended with dramatic sighs and slammed doors. And Max, my youngest brother, the self-proclaimed genius, decided he couldn't be taught by normal means and tried to teach himself using YouTube and pure chaos. His garage lab experiments became more and more daring and likely to catch fire. Into this empty space, this growing mess, I, Ethan, quietly stepped. I took on the extra work, silently, automatically. It wasn't a planned choice, it was an instinct, a pulling force to keep things steady. I watched Abby without making it obvious, stopping arguments before they fully started, offering a quiet word of reason, and changing the subject to avoid parent lectures. I listened for explosions in Max's garage lab, ready to step in before anything expensive broke. I went with Greg on his increasingly confused trips to the grocery store, gently guiding him away from strange health foods and towards meals people would actually eat. I became the hidden organizer, the silent helper, the one who calmed emotions. But no one noticed, or if they did, they never said anything. My efforts were unseen, just part of the background noise of family life, expected. Every invisible effort weighed me down like heavy stones in my chest. Every unspoken comment, every frustrated thought about how crazy things were getting stayed stuck in my throat, not dealt with, and heavy, a growing, unbearable burden. It all broke one Thursday. I came home late, tired from a particularly tough robotics club meeting. I walked into what could only be described as emotional wreckage. Abby was crying. Elaine was pacing, giving a full therapist-style speech. Max had broken something expensive sounding in the kitchen, and Greg, as expected, was in the garage, his favorite hiding place when he was stressed. I dropped my backpack by the door. I took a deep, shaky breath. The air was thick with unspoken words and leftover bad feelings. Then, I walked out.
Not to make a point, not as a rebellion, not with a dramatic door slam or a yelled swear word. Just out. One foot in front of the other. A simple, quiet exit. A punctuation mark. I ended up at the old playground, the one with the monkey bars that used to be giant mountains in my imagination as a kid. Now they were just cold, uncaring metal under a huge, darkening sky. Under a yellow streetlight, I sat on a lonely swing. Its chains creaked gently under my weight, and there, in the cool, quiet air, I let myself feel what I'd been avoiding for months. I was angry. Not loudly, not dramatically, just deeply. A cold, heavy anger that settled in my bones. Angry that being good, being dependable, being the one who kept things together, didn't mean anyone actually saw me. Angry that nobody ever asked if I was okay. Nobody ever asked what I needed. Nobody ever. Angry that the reward for being strong, for being the stable one, was always being asked to carry more and more. The weight, it seemed, only pulled on the quiet ones. Part 5. Standing on Gravity. When I came home, the house was quieter. The lights were on, making warm, inviting squares on the lawn. Elaine was already on the porch, sitting on the top step, lit by the soft glow of the porch light. Waiting. Her shoulders were slumped, and for the first time in a long time, she looked less like a therapist and more like a tired mother. "I didn't know where you'd gone, Ethan," she said, her voice soft. "You didn't ask," I replied, my voice rough, the anger still a low hum in my chest, but strangely clear. It wasn't blaming her, it was just stating a fact. The clear, factual way I spoke, which she usually found annoying, was, at that moment, a pure expression of my truth. She nodded slowly, like she'd just been told a hard truth, not an insult. She looked at her hands, clasped loosely in her lap. "I forget sometimes that you're not just okay automatically, that you're not just the strong one who doesn't need anything." I sat down beside her, the concrete cool under my legs. The porch light flickered above us like a huge sigh from the universe, lighting up the silence that settled between us. This was silence, the rarest kind in the Weldon house. The kind that wasn't just a break between arguments or a moment for thinking. It was a silence of shared understanding, of being open, of truly listening.
"I forget, too," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw past the therapist, past the mother, to the person who was also dealing with her own complicated life, her own pressures. Elaine reached for my hand, her fingers warm and surprisingly firm, holding mine. It was a simple, real gesture of connection, without analysis or a hidden plan. "You don't have to carry everything, Ethan." I looked up at the stars, then back at her. The anger had gone down, replaced by a quiet, deep understanding of myself. I wasn't just reacting to hidden meanings anymore. I was defining my own. "I know," I said. And I meant it. "But I can. That's the point." And in that moment, I think she saw what the rest of us had missed, what had been hidden by the kind but messy chaos and the fake perfectness. That gravity isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself loudly or with big speeches. It just holds. It is the quiet, invisible force that keeps things from falling apart. I was not just being pulled by my family's gravity, I was a source of it. My quiet strength, my careful observations, my willingness to understand and step in were not just burdens. They were my own deep, powerful pulling force, holding my family together even when they didn't realize they were drifting. I was the silent, steady anchor. The Weldon house remained, still neat, still a little pleased with itself from the outside. The arguments would still happen, of course. Elaine would still analyze. Greg would still make things efficient. Abby would still express her strong anger. And Max would undoubtedly still set things on fire in the garage. The challenges and difficulties remained, a constant, beautiful hum beneath the surface of our lives. This was the rubbing that comes from a group of basically good, kind-hearted people trying to live life together. But now, they felt less like burdens and more like the unavoidable, often funny, side effects of being connected. I was still in the middle of it all, but now I was standing on my own 2 feet. I was carrying my weight, not because I had to, but with a new, quiet confidence. My own space was stable, and that, I realized, was a pretty good place to be.